I want to talk about three kinds of public servants in the interest of facilitating some positive conversation about how to improve the way our society takes care of itself. The three groups are firefighters, police officers, and teachers. Obviously, among those three, police officers have rightfully fallen under the greatest scrutiny as of late. I've taken flack in the past for this, but I'm going to go ahead and inject some nuance into the popular criticism of police in general. Some people are eager to critique literally 100% of the police force based on the actions of some of its members, just because they belong to the same occupation. That's ridiculous. There is also a disproportionate number of black civilians who are mistreated and killed by police in our country. As a friendly reminder, however, white people also get harassed and killed by the police. In fact, on average, more white people get killed by police each year than black people, though per capita, minorities do receive much more police brutality than their white counterparts. I'm bringing up that no ethnicity is safe from this because it's important to understand that a problem as severe as police brutality not only indirectly but directly affects white people too. It's not just a problem that falls on the shoulders of a single demographic, and it's unwise for minorities who have to deal with the problem the most to bring it up in a fashion that suggests the other 77% of the country doesn't have to worry about it, when they do. We all do. I'm not prepared to assume that the police force systematically trains its members to harshly racially profile the citizens with whom they interact, at least not on a coast-to-coast level, even if it does happen in some places. I imagine that the mistreatment and distrust of minorities is more based on cultural and media influences of ignorance and stereotypes than something instructed in police academy. It appears to me that we have two separate problems, problem X being racism and problem Y being police behavior. I think it's unwise to allow the fact that problems X and Y overlap to allow us to think that they're the same thing and not tackle both problems with the zeal they require. So what is the systematic problem with the police force, and is there one? Well, let's compare it to those other groups I mentioned. Of the three, and feel free to disagree with me if you wish, but I say the public most appreciates them in order of firefighters the most, teachers the second most, and police dead last. Ideally, they'd all provide noble public services and be equally respected and revered for their commitment to making communities better and safer places. But in my observation, that's not even close. So why not? With any profession, nobody truly understands it unless they do it or have done it themselves for a considerable time. As I belong to only one of those three, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in the other two. So let's look at them all strictly from a position of the civilian perception, which is all that really matters in terms of how people feel about them. Firefighters. All that the layman knows about firefighters is that during their downtime, they're training to fight fires, educating people on fire prevention and rescue, and waiting to be called on in case of an emergency. When they are called upon, they respond as quickly as possible, and their immediate priority is to make things better for the people who are in danger, or at the very least stop things from getting worse. They are prepared to risk their lives and save civilians, and we regard every firefighter as willing to do this regardless of any demographics to which the victims belong. I've never heard of someone having a negative experience with firefighters, only going through negative experience that firefighters made better. Teachers. It's well known that teachers take on a difficult job of educating many children at a time for significantly less pay than those in the private sector who have the same level of education. Because there are more teachers than firefighters and far more direct interactions with them, people have a wider variety of experiences with a wider variety of teachers. Some have lasting positive memories of teachers who changed their lives for the better, and some have the exact opposite memory of certain teachers who left school as a whole bitter in their memories. But overall, society tends to understand that most teachers want the best for all of their students, even if some of them are really bad at their jobs. Police. Police cars traditionally have something to the effect of "serve and protect" painted on their doors, but even though they should be another group that we regard as a society as people who are willing to put their lives on the line, I don't know anybody who sees a police officer and really thinks, oh, that's someone who's here to protect and serve me. Well, maybe unless they're little kids. As a highly law-abiding adult citizen myself with no need to be paranoid due to guilt, my initial reaction to a police car is still one of fear. It wasn't until recently I realized that I feel safer walking or driving through an area with known criminal activity than I do walking or driving past the police. I don't consider all police to be crooked, corrupt, or power-hungry, trigger-happy assholes, but if I'm going to take my chance of walking or driving past a gangster, I'd rather it be one who can't shoot me and fairly easily get away with it, or give me a ticket that can financially cripple me for the next 5 years because he or she is having a bad day and claims something unverifiable about how I was driving. At least the gangsters without badges have the legal system to fear if they murder me, and if they rob me, it's only going to be once, not every month for the next half a decade. So, how have police gotten to this point? How is this range so grand between being a firefighter who seems to be a universally respected and appreciated public servant, and a police officer who appears to be a very universally feared public servant whose mere presence can make people feel uncomfortable? Well, for starters, there aren't many well-documented cases and countless videos spanning cyberspace of firefighter brutality. Because, as far as I know, it doesn't exist. Now, police brutality certainly does, and we happen to be in an era where more video evidence and abuse of authority is on display than ever before. I'm rather skeptical whenever I view such footage, especially if it's just a snapshot of the moment without showing what builds up to the police abuse. But in every such video that I've seen that does provide full context, I witness what I consider the cringeworthy cause of nearly all of that police injustice. That cause is the lack of an officer's willingness and or ability to de-escalate a situation. Now, I don't mean to say that this never happens. Just last year, there was an excellent story in Virginia where city police had their police cars shot up and were able to apprehend both black suspects without firing a single shot of their own. That's fantastic police work. But stories like that are few and far between and often don't spread as well on social media. I recognize these kind of efforts, but let's focus on what's been exacerbating the already abysmal reputation of cops: the tragic consequences of a lack of de-escalating. What do I mean by de-escalating? It brings us back to good and bad teachers. In every single classroom management workshop and training session that I've attended across the 3 different states in which I've taught, de-escalation is brought up as a key strategy in controlling potentially dangerous or highly distracting students and situations. Good teachers are able to demonstrate solid judgment and patience with hostile students, avoid an ego-driven power struggle, and calm those students down without needing to send them out of the room or call upon authoritarian punitive measures. That's because human beings have emotions, and sometimes they need space to vent those emotions. In the case of conflict, the onus is on the professional to put his or her ego aside, give the student that space, then tactfully rein the situation back in. Bad teachers usually have poor classroom management and lack the willingness, judgment, and or ability to do so. The consequences in their case include kids getting kicked out of class when they piss off a teacher whose ego couldn't take it, and that kid having a sour feeling with the teacher in the classroom and oftentimes with education in general. As bad as that is, the consequences in police interactions, when they aren't willing to de-escalate situations, are even greater. In every police brutality video I've tortured myself to watch through, I see it happen without fail. Poor police officers escalate situations into becoming more dangerous and tragic than they need to be. Rather than showing patience and restraint, poor police officers provoke suspects and bystanders who are already in an emotionally unstable state. They bark orders, often laced with profanity, brandish weapons, and make threats and completely uncalled for demands rather than behaving like decent professionals with the kind of patience that their jobs require. And then, when the situation almost inevitably spirals out of control, they play the power card. That's when innocent teenage girls who can't weigh more than 115 pounds get grappled to the ground with knees in their backs. That's when would-be completely peaceful protesters get faces full of pepper spray at point-blank range. That's when middle-aged men get tased and dragged out of their vehicles. That's when women wind up dead in jail cells after failing to use their turn signals. That's when teenage young men are left bleeding in the street, waiting for a second set of sirens to vainly arrive at the scene and clean up the consequences with a body bag. Now, In many cases I've seen the civilian does say something rude, disrespectful, or expressive of emotional frustration, and a citizen might even be completely guilty of that which they're being accused. Now, of course, as citizens, dealing with what we know to be a potentially lethal and apparently insecure police force, we should protect ourselves by being as polite as possible and avoid giving those itchy trigger fingers any excuse to twitch, whether we are guilty or innocent. But the true responsibility should be placed on the ones who are meant to protect and serve. I don't know if they receive the kind of de-escalation training that teachers do, and if teachers are just more patient in general than cops. I don't know if police forces are just deeply ignorant of such tactics and are instead trained to establish a highly authoritarian attitude in an effort to intimidate civilians into submission. I encourage anyone with police training and experience to enlighten me in the comments section. What I do know is that an officer's bruised ego is a far superior alternative to a civilian's broken bones or stolen life. I, for one, would appreciate if not just some or most, but every single person who opens a car door with the words serve and protect would recognize that too before their shifts begin.